Welcome to the Sustainable Travel Podcast. I'm Emma, your host from That Travel. This is a podcast that interviews a range of different travellers from different backgrounds to see what sustainable travel means to them. Today, I am here with Tim van den Thillart, creator of Bookachoo, a platform on a mission to replace 1 million flights with train tickets. And today we're going to be talking all about trains and what exactly is stopping people from booking them. Hi, Tim.
Hey, good afternoon. How are you?
Good afternoon. How are you? I'm doing well, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm very fine. Actually excited for the podcast. So excited to speak about trains as always. So that's pretty cool.
The resident train expert, I'm sure. So I'm really excited about it. Tell us a little bit about you, who you are, and how you came to be interested in sustainable travel and trains as well.
I'm Tim. I grew up in the Netherlands, and I've been liking trains, I think, for the last, well, as long as I remember. I've always found them cool as an efficient means of transport. Um, and I really like traveling as well when I became a bit older, and I got a job in which I was actually able to travel quite a lot. So I found myself on many planes. I was working for NGOs as a financial controller. That brought me to faraway places, and that was really cool. But I also started to feel a bit uneasy about the flying and my carbon footprint, stuff like that. Um, and I remember one trip I was waiting at Frankfurt Airport for my last leg back to Amsterdam, and I had to wait, I don't know, 3 hours for my flight or something like that for my last leg. And I thought I could as well take the train back home, and of course you can't because you're part of a longer trip, and your luggage is part of the trip as well. Uh, um, but it came at the moment that I did start feeling at unease about my carbon footprint. So then I thought, okay, let's do it. Let's take the train next time when it's possible. So I basically made a pledge whenever I fly for work, because I thought that it's meaningful to fly and that it would add value. So if I had to fly, do it as sustainable as possible. And actually, that worked out quite well, especially when you're based in the Netherlands, because although many people don't know, there are quite some alternatives. There is Brussels Airport, Charles de Gaulle in Paris, and Frankfurt. So in the next few years, I found myself on trains to those three airports and then taking a flight to, well, from Brussels and Paris to Francophone Africa, from Frankfurt sometimes to other locations that are not directly connected to Amsterdam. And that worked out quite well. It went on for a few years. At the organizations I worked for, my colleagues really liked the idea. They wanted to mimic it, but it turned out to be a bit more difficult than they thought initially. And actually, the travel manager there didn't really like it.
Mhm.
And that's a bit how I came up with the idea of Bookachoo to make it available for everybody and also visible that it is possible.
It's a really good idea because I resonate a little bit with this because I used to work, as I've said on here a few times, for a private jet company. Um, I've been working in travel for my whole adult career, and the jet company I used to work there, I wasn't selling jets, I was selling travel, so like flights and hotels. And I was a manager of three different offices, so I had to travel a lot. So I had to go from where I live in the northeast of England up to London most weeks, I would say. And then from there to Frankfurt, to Paris, to Madrid, and to Aix-en-Provence in the south of France. And I refused to fly. And my boss couldn't believe it. He was like, "But we're a flight company, like, it was like crazy to him. He couldn't believe it. And so I was taking like trains.
What year are you speaking about?
Oh, last year, like as late as
Okay.
last year. And the year before. But yeah, so I was taking trains to each of these different destinations, and it was pretty easy. Like it wasn't costing them much more. Like it wasn't taking much time out of my working day because I could work on the train. And I was like, this is brilliant. Like everybody should be doing this for work, and it's so uncommon.
Indeed, it's actually quite easy if you know the connections a little bit. And I think you mentioned there London, Frankfurt as well.
Yeah,
That's just a walk from Gare du Nord to Gare de l'Est in Paris,
yeah.
which is really easy. It's virtually the same station.
Mhm.
Um, and I think what you were also saying, like you are working on the train, you don't even lose any time. And well, yeah, the other advantages, boarding the train in the very city center,
Yeah.
disembarking in the very city center. I feel less tired when I come even from a long train trip. I'm less tired than I come off a very short plane trip.
Yeah, same. And it was even like I could go from London to Brussels and then you don't even need to change train stations at all. Like you can just go London, Brussels, Brussels, Frankfurt. And I guess it would take me from Durham, because that's where I live in the north, all in about 9 hours. But if I think about it, like there's no direct flights from here. So I would have had to
Yeah.
go like like maybe to Amsterdam or to I don't know, somewhere else, or go all the way to Newcastle, which is about 45 minutes for me and then get the flight. Like I really wasn't saving that much time to fly.
Now, I think people take that for granted. They look at the flight, and I think it's a bit unfair when they look at the time of flying, they look at the flight and they take for granted that you have to go to the airport, not to
Yeah.
speak of the boarding procedures and the margin you have to take into account. But somehow, like going to the airport and then also from the airport to the city center often takes like 45 minutes by train or something like that. People do not tend not to take that into account, whereas it's both tiring and it takes time, and often it's really a short stretch in which you cannot really make the best of the time because if you board a train for 30 minutes, it's hard to get any work done. Or even if you're not getting any work done, you can't even listen to a full music album in
Mhm.
30 minutes. So I feel like if you are on a day trip by train and there is a good stretch of 3, 4 hours on the same train, that actually is very convenient,
Yeah,
both in terms of work or in terms of relaxing if you wish.
definitely. And especially for business travelers are who I know you focus on, because I think when they look at it, the main thing in their head is like, I've got to save time and therefore I've got to take a flight. But as you said, like, okay, you're saving time, but are you actually getting anything done?
Yeah, it's it's this time aspect, and also in business, it's funny that even money um, really plays a role. If the train is like 300 euros more expensive than the train, they still go for the plane because of the cost perspective. But 300 euros is basically 3 hours of work. And when you're waiting for security on an airport, if you're waiting um, in the queue actually to board the plane, there's nothing you can do. Then you have to wait until the plane takes off and you're not allowed to open your laptop. And if we speak about London, Amsterdam, you virtually can only 20 minutes use your laptop. You can only work for 20 minutes. And you're in a very narrow space, whereas in train is really convenient to work, in fact. And you have internet when you're on the train,
Mhm.
always.
Yeah, and it's normally quite good internet. Um, but let's kind of get into like the meat of what we're going to be talking about today. Um, which is we had a chat before you came on the show and we were talking about how like why more people don't take trains, this kind of inaccessibility. Um, and for me, a lot of the time, like I hear people saying, you know, it's so expensive to take the train, like I can't possibly take the train, and they seem to almost like twist themselves in knots, coming up with excuses. But it is a thing. Like there is a thing where trains are not accessible. So, what, in your opinion, is going on? Like, what makes them so inaccessible?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. So I had a bit of a thought of it because it's all true what you say. People come up with excuses, and I think that's definitely the mindset and also a bit of the knowledge.
Yeah.
That's definitely there is the booking experience and the price that plays a part in it. And I think the third thing is some technical issues. Maybe we come back to that later. But I think the mindset and the knowledge to start off with, it's really interesting that um, people come up with knots in their hat indeed. Why not take a train as if it is more difficult to board a train? And I think that has to do that people do not know about train networks and what is actually possible and which cities are connected. Somehow it's easy to go on a website and look for a flight, and the website just shows you how to take that flight. And if there is a stopover, you're guided through the whole process. And there's not much that you need to know up front and not much that you need to worry about if you do that. And somehow there is this image of train travel being more difficult,
Yeah.
whereas I think many train stations are easier to navigate than many airports.
Yeah.
And what we were saying before, it's way more comfortable and less tiring to take a train. And what I was saying about people not knowing the possibilities, not really having a map in the mind of what cities are connected. Recently, someone came to me and told me that he was going from Zurich to Paris and that he was looking for flights. And then I said, "You're not doing that. Um, I'll get you a train ticket because there is actually a direct train from Zurich to Paris."
Mm.
And if you're, well, maybe French and Swiss people, many of them also don't know it. But if you're not from those two countries and you happen to have to travel between the two, people just don't know that there is this connection, and they also don't look for it. They don't go to a website on which they search if there is a possibility, how long it would take, etc.
Mhm.
So I think it's definitely mindset that it is just the first go to look for flights for international travel, and maybe it's logical because cross-border high-speed train travel, it's a fairly new thing in Europe.
Mm.
It's only like 30 years old, something like that, whereas we've been flying for more than 100 years.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of it.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah, I think there's a lot to it. I know you're going to come to more things as well, but like when we're talking about train travel, like we're literally talking about the most accessible continent in the world for trains. Like Europe is
yeah,
so easy to take a train. And if we think about that in comparison to like Asia or America or Africa, like we really are lucky, but it still seems impossible.
indeed, the UK apart, you don't even have to show your passport. Well, maybe to the
Yeah.
train company to show that the ticket is in your name, but you can cross 3, 4 countries in a day without bothering about actually border control whatsoever. There isn't even security apart from Spain and apart from the Channel in Europe, so it's really accessible. But yeah, we don't know. Maybe because we have such a dense network and there are so many connections that the big connections don't stand out. I was I was thinking of this that actually with those cross-border high-speed connections that there are that I've never seen. Well, they must be around, but you don't see too often a map like a metro map of high-speed trains in Europe, which big cities are actually connected, especially cross-border, because within a country it's known. People in France know that Paris and Marseille are connected. Um, but as I was saying, people don't know. Also, Milan, Paris has a direct train. Many people don't know that, and it's really convenient to take that train. So, yeah, it's interesting. Why? How do you think that it comes? You say it's so accessible in Europe, but people don't know it.
I think you're totally right. Like, I mean, for myself, next month, I'm visiting a few friends in Europe. It's like I'm basically my family's going on holiday to Portugal, and I decided, right, I'm going to go there overland. I don't need to fly. I have the luxury of time. I'm really privileged in this way. And it's hard. Like, and this is coming from an ex-travel agent who, like, I actually do know the train connections. And I'm looking on like Trainline, and it's like it just comes up with these ridiculous, like 15 stop journeys, or like you can take a coach and it's like quite expensive besides anything. And then the connections don't make sense. So then I'm sort of going in, breaking those journeys apart and going, I'm not doing that. That's ridiculous. I'm instead going to do this, which I know. But then I have to build it one by one. And of course, you can make so
Yeah,
many mistakes.
that's really interesting that you do that because I do the same, and I really value Omeo Trainline Rail Europe because they're really good platforms. And actually, I do refer people to their like B2C people, like non-business travelers, to look there for the possibilities and also to book there because they're doing a tremendous job. I know how difficult it is on their back end, how they combine everything, but there are still connections that do not appear on their websites. Where I do the same as you, that I connected myself. Well, there's many examples, especially with the new low cost operators in Spain. They're not really connected to the rest of it. So if you go from Paris to Madrid, you might want to make the connection yourself with the TGV to Barcelona and then to have a Irio train to Madrid onwards. Um, a nicer example I find always, if you want to go from Amsterdam to, let's say, Lyon or Marseille, people think you have to change trains in Paris and you have to take a metro from Gare du Nord to Gare de Lyon. But actually, you can take a train to Brussels and then bypass Paris and then have that direct train from Brussels to Marseille. And it would also work with a stop to Barcelona, which is way more convenient, but nobody is doing it now. And I'm sure those guys are working on it, but it's interesting to look for it myself as well, because that also gives me a direction what we need to build at Bookachoo and what we need to connect and how we should be clever about the different APIs that we connect there. But
Yeah.
it's challenging. It is. And not to speak about your passenger rights in case of a delay.
Yeah. So from my perspective, like what I see is, and to be honest, I hadn't even really thought about this kind of technological side of it. much before, and like the technology and how that's kind of holding us back. The issues I see and the issues that I hear about are like the expense. So trains are really expensive compared to flights, which I would mostly agree with. I think in some countries they're okay, but like for the most part, they do tend to be more expensive. And the second thing is the train stations. Like people, I don't think train stations are more difficult than airports, but I think people have a familiarity with airports that they don't have with train stations. Like in an airport, you go here, then you go here, then you go to departures, then you go through security, then you fill up your water bottle, go to the toilet, then you're at the gate. And I think people know this is my process in an airport. Whereas in a train station, it's kind of, okay, off you go. And they're like, oh my God, I don't know what to do with that.
I think in an airport, people feel protected. Like I'm part of the airport, I'm part of the journey, and they call your name if you don't board the plane because they're
Yeah.
also pretty nervous about you not being on the plane and your luggage is. So that might be part of it. And I think indeed most train stations are really easy to navigate. I think wayfinding is really great, especially on this continent. There is a few old ones that are a bit more difficult to navigate, but I wouldn't. It would never cost you more than 10 minutes to find your right platform there.
I mean, I would agree with you that I think the Paris stations are quite challenging for people who are not used to train stations because in particular like the Gare du Nord is split like Eurostar and then like the regional
Yeah.
trains. So if you don't realize you're on the top floor, sometimes it's like I've had it before where I've been like, where do I go? But you do figure it out, and I think it's this like fear of the unknown. And you know how like a while ago, like maybe 10 years ago in London, not London, in Europe, you used to have to get your train tickets stamped.
Yeah.
I think people still have this sort of idea that like, oh, well, it's all different and every station is different and it's scary. And it's not really like that anymore.
No, no, it isn't. It's extremely convenient. And actually, the things that are annoying at airports, they're taken away at most train stations in Europe, and they make it way more convenient. Do you also think that part of it is that if we speak about international travel, that in an airport like the language is English, but whereas if you're at Gare du Nord, you're basically in France, and that is also impressive for people?
Definitely. I was about to say that. I like so you're probably similar to me. I'm not sure, but like I speak French and German. So most places in Europe, and I can understand Spanish. So most places in Europe, I'm not going to be totally dropped in the middle of the ocean and not understand. But actually, I have colleagues who really don't speak like a bean of French, and they would get put in the Gare du Nord and just be like, yeah, like I have no idea. Like the signage, the announcements, and yeah, I think that's overwhelming for them.
Yeah, I can imagine. I
Yeah.
can imagine. It's difficult also while you've traveled a lot, you speak your languages, to imagine that, but it's maybe good to take that into account. And maybe if we design those stations and if we design, I don't know, train ticket platforms, whatever, that we take that in mind. I've got a few ideas in mind, but that's really for the future on the backlog. That sometimes if you, for example, that stopover in Paris, that you want to guide people how to do that stopover and
Mm,
thinking of maps, but also on the ticket between. Actually, this is a nice one. You have to buy a ticket between a metro ticket between, for example, Gare du Nord and Gare de Lyon. You used to be able to buy that metro ticket on the Thalys actually,
mhm,
before it was Eurostar. Nowadays, you can preload it on your phone.
mm.
So that's something we tell our customers that they can do that and they are more at ease because then you don't have to buy anything at Gare du Nord. But you cannot buy it online upfront for somebody else. I think that's also a problem. So the
That is
RER you can, but not the metro.
that is a problem because as a travel agent, I used to struggle with that as well. And with travel agents, they often just will not offer trains because it's like so hard. Like as an agent, you never know if someone is going to have to go and pick up the train ticket, if they'll get it posted to them, if they'll be able to get it online. And it's something that we used to just really avoid because it was like
Yeah.
a minefield, you know, and you'd get clients who were really uncomfortable with tech and just couldn't deal with it at all. So I think that's something else I wanted to touch on was when we talk about access, like access in terms of disabilities as well, because we've had a few wheelchair users on the show, and we had also Kirsten, who is an autistic traveler, and she was saying how she finds train stations really overwhelming because they're very noisy, whereas in airports it tends to be like more calm, like there's, they're more set up for people to just sort of chill and sit about. And then for the wheelchair users that we had on the show, two of them were saying that, well, one of them, who is called Meryl, was saying that she finds trains much easier than flights. Um, so it, again, like, and it's all kind of not regulated in the same way that flights are.
Yeah, it's true. I think flights it's international, it's standardized. So we could speak a long time about that. Why flights are more international, why train systems are different between different countries, and
Mm,
also in terms of ticketing. But I think what you touch upon now, um, you have different standards, and also if it comes to access with a wheelchair, if you have a domestic system like a metro system, everything is same level. It's really easy accessible. But
really?
if you look at only the Netherlands and France, they have different platform heights. So it's virtually impossible, or you need to have dedicated platforms. But um, that's another story. They have that in Spain, and one of the strengths of the French and the Dutch and the German network is that it is integrated with the regular train network. But it makes it really difficult, actually, to come up with standardization, because
Mm,
you can never have level boarding in both Amsterdam and Paris because the platforms differ, and that's because how it's grown. And the same what you say about stations. They're noisy and they can be overwhelming. If I think of Amsterdam Central Station, but the same of the other stations we mentioned, they're really old,
mm.
and they have their charm, but it comes at a price.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I think when it comes to platform level that you mentioned, like that is super interesting. And for people who need the access, a train could be a fantastic option because actually a lot of people that I speak to are saying like, airplanes damage wheelchairs all the time, like they're not good for disabled travelers. And if we
Mm.
had this ease of access in trains, like that could be a great solution. But it is really hard because trains are so old. Like the system has been here for the last century at least, and it's all grown at different stages, and it's really hard.
It used to be a really domestic affair, and actually, somehow it's a miracle that we have the same gauge all over Europe except for Spain and Portugal, basically. I don't know how that came about, but they did that very well. It's not the same with the power supply and stuff like that, but some of the things were standardized, um, yeah, quite early, which is cool. And I think we should give a big shout out to Spain. They have a Iberian gauge, which is a bit wider, but they actually said, okay, we want to build a high-speed network, and we want to have it connected to the rest of Europe. So we do that separate of our existing network. It comes at a high cost because they need more platforms that really cost them capacity at train stations, but they did it, and now they have trains to France, and from there they can go further into Europe, and now they have the second biggest high-speed network in the world.
Yeah, awesome. I think it's as well when you think about this kind of thing, all the trains look different. Like when you were saying there, I was thinking like we've got so many different styles. Like obviously the Dutch trains are double level. And if
Yeah.
it's really funny because when Brits go to like the Netherlands for the first time, they're always like, look at these trains, they're like two levels. It's like a double-decker bus. It's so cool.
It's really cool, and you mentioned that the double-decker trains in the Netherlands, if there's a lower platform in the Netherlands than, for example, in Switzerland, so you actually have to take two or three steps to go onto um, what is it called, the hallway of a coach, and there
Yeah.
you can go up or down. That's what we do in the Netherlands, but because of the steps, it actually takes quite some time to disembark and to embark a train. So the halting time of that train is pretty high compared to a train with level boarding.
Mm,
And if you look at Switzerland, there you board actually at the lower deck, and then there is only a stair towards the upper deck. Um, and well, then the Swiss trains cannot uh, ride in the Netherlands and the other way around.
mm.
But if once you see it, you see the differences everywhere, and even in the double-decker trains. The difference between the different countries, people normally think of gauge. And I just mentioned Spain, but there is, and you said the trains are different, and there is indeed trains that can run in Spain and France, and there is trains that can run in Netherlands, Belgium, and France, but there is no train that can run in all those far countries.
Yeah,
So although it might seem that everything is connected, you cannot, there is not a single train in the world at this moment that can run from Amsterdam to Barcelona, because that asks for different locomotives, different power supply, etc. So currently they can only do 3 countries or 2 countries, but connecting them is a bit more difficult.
that'll be why I've been struggling so much with my trip going that way. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a lot of things then that make trains inaccessible. And I guess what we could say is, so we've got the technology, we've got the actual trains themselves, and the fact that they're all different, the different like standards of platform. Then we've got like the cost factor as well. And I think something else that you kind of hinted at is this nationalization of trains. So like in the UK, our trains are not nationalized. We have different companies, private companies that run our trains, which also makes them very expensive. And with like the country is thinking about nationalizing our train service entirely. And in other countries, this is all a bit different as I understand it. So some trains are nationalized, some are not, some are run by private companies. So again, it's all, there's just no regulation in that way.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Is it a private company or is it a government-owned company or is it a
Yeah.
joint venture between different government-owned train companies? Because that's often the case. And it's really interesting because we have a difference in Europe between, well, the north and the south, so to say. And I think that here it's really connected to price, because what we see is that towards and from London, the only company that gets you through the channel is Eurostar,
Mm.
um, which is owned by SNCF, which is the French state company. So basically, that's a government company controlling it, and it's only one company doing that. And there's many people saying that's the reason that prices are quite high to go to and from London. In the Netherlands, there's basically for the most part, for the most domestic market, there is just the state-owned railway company, and only international trains. There is only Eurostar and then Deutsche Bahn entering the Netherlands, but there's no real competition. But if you look at Italy, it's not much, but there is competition. There is different companies operating on the same stretch, and what you see there is actually that prices go down and service has increased. And in Spain, between Barcelona and Madrid, there is even 4 companies. And you can speak about this still state-backed companies, but still there is competition there, and prices between Barcelona and Madrid are really low.
Yeah.
It's really great. Yeah, and you see passenger numbers have increased tremendously over the past 20 years.
Yeah. And then you mentioned Deutsche Bahn, the infamous Deutsche Bahn, um, who are always delayed. And I feel this is another issue we could speak about as well, is I think people, when they take a flight, they know, okay, if it's delayed, here's what I do. If it's cancelled, here's what I do. There's a very specific process in place. You know who to speak to, you know who's going to give you money back. But when you have a Deutsche Bahn train, not to single them out, but they are the worst. Like when you take a Deutsche Bahn train and it's delayed by 6 hours, like what do you do in that situation? Who do you go
Yeah.
to? I mean, there is information if you speak German, there is information if you care to seek it out, but it's not clear in my opinion at all.
No, it's not standardized. And on the state-owned Renfe website in Spanish, you have to search for a long time for a very tiny button actually to get back your money,
Mm,
um, which you can have an opinion about if that is nice or not. Um, Also, I think we were speaking a bit about mindset. People seem to be a bit more forgiving if a flight has a delay than a train. I
yeah.
think people are a bit harder on trains, whereas on planes it's kind of part of the business, part of the game. Um, yeah, it's true. There is no centralization there. There is only limited European regulation about getting your money back. Because in one country it's if the delay 30 minutes, in another country if it's 60 minutes, and
Mhm.
then you also don't know where to go. And if you take a train in a country that you do not live in and that you do not speak the language of, it's really hard to find it out where you actually should be. I think it's a very nice one to put on the list of what Europe could be do, what European Union could do actually to improve things. I
Mm.
have to say though, I have to defend Deutsche Bahn a little bit. Um, and I think the comparison to planes and airports comes here. An airport normally is owned by one company, be it a state-owned company or a private company. It's one company, and there is different operators making use of the facilities of that airport. And at a train station, I think it should be the same, or at least if you want to learn from the flight industry, from aviation, you can look at that, have a train station owned by a company, and then there's different operators making use of the facilities, of the platforms, etc. And if you look at the market opening liberalization of the infrastructure, then there should be a company that actually owns the tracks, does the maintenance, and then there is some operators making use of it and also getting delays if there is a problem. And in this case, it's um, only Deutsche Bahn running trains in Germany. So therefore, if something goes wrong with the tracks in Germany, then we think it's Deutsche Bahn's mistake. But basically, it's the mistake of the infrastructure operator, um, and not so much Deutsche Bahn's fault. And that would be a bit more visible if there were more operators between, I don't know, Frankfurt, Berlin, and all three would have had delays. Then we would say it's the German tracks. And now we say it's Deutsche Bahn. And it's interesting that yeah, people look at Deutsche Bahn and I think that that's perfectly normal, but that's also because people do not make that distinction because it's not clear that it is different.
Yeah, it's not. And I think, I mean, I'm joking about Deutsche Bahn, but I've had so many delays with them that I hold a bit of a grudge, I have to say. And I think what it is that when you look at a country like Germany, and it has a very extensive train network, and it's generally regarded for its organization, it is odd that their like rail network is sort of so delayed so often. And I think in particular when you compare it to countries like Spain that you were talking about, where Spain has almost the opposite sort of reputation of being quite laid back. But Spanish trains
Yeah,
are absolutely amazing. And it's quite interesting, this comparison, you know?
it's very interesting. And if you put it even further south, they say the most punctual high-speed line in the world, well, maybe China apart, is now the new high-speed line in Morocco, the Al Borak between Tanger and Casablanca.
Mm,
But why is that so punctual? Because it has dedicated tracks, only tracks. It's not so densely used as it is in Germany, and the same
mm,
in Spain. Barcelona, Madrid has many trains, but if I look at Granada, Madrid, there's only three trains a day.
mm,
Whereas in Germany, the tracks of both the high-speed trains are used like every 10 minutes. There's a train running, sometimes high speed, sometimes non-high speed. So it's a bit harder there to actually not have delayed. So maybe it's overused, but there you see that Spain really benefits from having dedicated high-speed tracks, where you sometimes also see in um, what do you call that? How would you call a RER or a cercanías network, like an
mm.
urban city rail network, something like that, to
Yeah,
have dedicated tracks, and metros have dedicated tracks, and they
metros.
use,
Yeah,
yeah, a metro is never delayed because there's dedicated track and it's not interlined with other metros. One day you see that makes it a bit harder in the German case because
yeah.
there's so many trains using those tracks
That's
that
true.
suffer from maintenance.
Yeah, and you very rarely get delays on metros, to be fair, apart from I guess like London Underground sometimes has a few delays, but it's like they just didn't bother to show up that train, so
Yeah.
they moved to the next one. But so that's loads. Like we've obviously covered a lot of different issues there. In your opinion, if you had to guess one, like what would you say is the biggest obstacle?
If we speak about cross-border high speed, it's just market opening liberalization. I would just say open it, get more companies running trains there, and then it might take time, but a lot of issues will be solved by itself.
Mm,
Um, that only works though if there is some kind of regulation from Europe, and then I think of timetable regulation and prioritizing international trains because we said that train world is pretty domestic, but you see it actually in the timetables. And you also see it in the delays. If there is a problem on the tracks, then the international trains get do not get the same priority as domestic trains get. And Europe might play a role in this, to actually get internationally standardized timetables, and actually that if you take one international train, that you have a cross-platform change to another international train. I was mentioning that example from Amsterdam to Lyon with a change in Brussels, which is really convenient, except for the fact that the change now takes 52 minutes. If you make that a cross-platform change, as if it were a domestic intercity, like they do in Switzerland, like they do in the Netherlands, like they do in Germany, um, then you could actually have a stopover of only 5 minutes, and you get 45 minutes of the whole trip.
Yeah, it's big. It's like
Yeah.
a big, big difference. I think what you say is really true, and I wonder if it could be applied internationally as well, not just within Europe, because one thing that I run up against really often when I talk about trains, because my audience, especially on Instagram, is quite international, I tend to get people sort of saying, well, that's well and good for you guys in Europe, but like, have you seen the trains in America? Or like, have you seen the trains in Asia? And it's really funny if you look at a map, I'm sure you've seen this, of like the train density in Europe versus the train density in America. And it wasn't until I saw this map that I was like, yeah, they've actually really got a point. You know, we complain about trains in Europe and all this access inaccessibility that we talked about. They don't even have a look in at that.
Yeah, it's very true. And the funny thing is, it used to be the other way around. There used to be railways in the US and passenger railways, and now all the tracks they are predominantly used for freight,
Yeah.
and a lot has been demolished indeed. It's a shame, and the talks that are going on about high speed in the US basically have come to a halt.
Mm.
There's not much interest by this administration to actually pursue those high-speed trains there.
Yeah.
It's yeah, it's hard in the US indeed. Although I have to say that Brightline is doing quite a good job in Florida, between the big cities there. It's not proper high speed, but it goes well. And I think that the remark that a friend of you made is that it's, you take for granted what we have in Europe, and it's pretty great what we have. And with the current infrastructure, we can do so much better. So a lot of things that we've been talking about is about standardization, regulation, better ticketing, opening up the tracks, etc. Um, and although I really like new tracks and I like new connections, we really haven't touched about it. It's with the current infrastructure, we can do so much more, because there is so much around. It's yeah, it's a luxury, and also what we should not underestimate, because our network in Europe is so old, the train stations tend to be in the very city center,
Mhm.
and that's really hard to retrofit. You see that in America as well. Between Dallas and Houston, the proposed stretch would not go into the very city center. And in Europe, we have the stations there already, and we have the corridors for trains running into it. I think that is really a great thing, and it's good that you mentioned that we should value it.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of positives to trains. I definitely don't want to downplay that when we're talking. I think the the issue as I see it is definitely mindset focus. Like I think a lot of people they love the idea of a train for like a slow sort of, meander through the countryside. But when it comes to actually getting somewhere, it tends to be dismissed. And I also think that there's a big emphasis at the moment, which I kind of love and I kind of dislike, of scenic trains being like idolized. And scenic trains are wonderful, but they're not the only trains. And I think when sometimes people go on trains, they're like, oh, I didn't get any views. Like, can you imagine? And it's like, well, there's no views on that particular stretch of track.
Yeah, it's funny. They think of it, you go to Southeast Asia and you take the train and it runs with 60k an hour or something like that. And it's marvelous and it's great. And it's really nice for a holiday, but not so much for a commute.
Yeah, we did a train. We took a train from Sydney to Brisbane in Australia, and it was like I think it was meant to be 12 hours. It ended up being about 16, and it was great fun. There was no facilities at all. There was no electricity, no internet. They had like a food cart that rolled around, and like it just was the most archaic train that you've ever seen. No views at all, and I was like I wasn't there for the views. I was there to get from A to B, and it was fun.
It is. It is. How do you see that? Do you see that trains need to be fun and it's cool that trains that often are still there, or do you think primarily they should be there for commute and for people getting as quickly as possible from A to B and they need to be efficient? How do you look at that?
I think it's really twofold. Like there's great marketing around trains like the Belmont, the previous Orient Express, and trains in Norway, scenic trains, the Rocky Mountaineer. These trains are amazing, and it's definitely worthwhile, like romanticizing train travel in this way for people to go and take those trains because ultimately they are still a means of getting from A to B that eliminate a flight. But at the same time, we need more accessible pricing for trains that are functional. Because if you have a train that goes from, let's say, if I was looking for a train, for example, from London to Prague, that should be doable by train in Europe within a day, in my opinion, because of the distance. But it's actually really hard to do that by a train, and especially at an accessible price. So I think we kind of need to strike a balance, like almost if I make a comparison that might sound a bit strange, but you know the way that cinemas have kind of stopped being like cheap experiences and they're now more like luxury experiences that people go and like spend the evening at the cinema. I think we're moving in that direction with trains, and I think in doing so, we are missing a trick for travel when it comes to functionality.
Think so. And do you see there a distinction between domestic trains and international trains, or between short distance and long distance trains?
Yeah, I think the international trains, like for all the reasons we've mentioned, it's very difficult because of the standardization. But I think when people consider taking an international train, they do like hold them to a much higher standard. And they're like, well, I'm crossing a
Yeah,
border, therefore I should have more luxury. That kind of vibe.
yeah, yeah. It's again the comparison to flying somehow, maybe unconsciously in the mind indeed.
Yeah, and also flying
Yeah.
has kind of come from being a luxury experience to being a budget experience, whereas train travel's almost done the opposite. What do you think about that? Do you think it's a good thing?
No, I think it's a risk that we run there. So I'm very much with you. And I live in Spain, and I often take the train from Granada to Madrid and from Granada to Malaga and other places. And Spain is a bit the odd one out in Europe because there is security checks for all domestic trains, no, for all domestic high-speed trains in Spain, and you get a bit of an airport experience. And also, if you're at one of the biggest train stations, you are not allowed on the platform more than 20 minutes before departure, whereas the train is standing there. Whereas we sat in the other stations in Europe that can be a bit overwhelming. You can just go onto any platform, jump on a train, which is really convenient and saves you a lot of time. And I see that Spain has actually imported the bad things of flying into train travel, and it takes a lot of time away from the passenger, from the traveler. Um, so that's definitely a risk I see there, and making it more luxurious, keeping prices up high, making international travel a special product versus domestic travel. Whereas what is international within Europe, it's a question you can ask. There's definitely a risk, and we've seen it in the Netherlands that there was um, after the high-speed track between Amsterdam and Rotterdam got opened, which is only 26 minutes, there was seat reservation obliged, whereas people were taking it just for the commute, living in Amsterdam, working in Rotterdam, and the other way around. And people were not happy with it. And there you see actually that that risk is real. That train companies sometimes do put those kind of measures in place that are not in the interest of the passenger, and it's like, yeah, making it less accessible in that sense. So that risk is definitely there.
Yeah, there's a we talk a little bit on this show about like it obviously making trains more accessible. involves bringing the price down. And it's kind of the case sometimes that like the journey that takes you the longest should be the cheapest in a way, like that is how it should be. But then we also have to look at like the fact that flying is becoming more accessible could be seen as a good thing because you know people need to be able to have that access to the world. It's complicated anyway, but what do you like in terms of solutions to bring this a bit more positive? What do you think we could do? Because you've said that we could do better in Europe. So what, like how? How could we do that?
Um, Well, I said about the market opening, so more operators. So we touched upon that already. But
Mhm.
another way we can do better is actually those kind of passenger rides. And I look a lot about combining trains and planes to get rid of those feeder flights, those really short flights between and Paris, Frankfurt, London, etc.
Mhm.
And what you should have there is actually an operator that allows you, especially if you if your trip starts at an airport. To me, it's really weird that you have to make a reservation for a specific train there, for a train of 10 past 11. Whereas you don't know if your flight has a delay, you don't know how long immigration takes, you don't know how long your suitcase takes to get there. So there should be, but I think that's with the operators. Um, there should be an easier system for changing a train or changing your seat reservation,
Mhm.
whatever. So that's what the operators can do better there. What resellers like us can do better, or there should be more sellers do better have kind of an insurance that if you miss your train that you can hop on another train, or if you miss your train that you can hop on another flight, where you combine trains and planes, you combine two different tickets. Who's going to take the responsibility? What I see in the flight industry is that there is some flight aggregators that actually combine, for example, Ryanair or EasyJet with um, I don't know, KLM, Air France. Um, that is at their risk, because
Yeah. Combined
if
ticket.
there is a delay, yeah, indeed, and go to gators and those kind of websites do that. So I think that um, online travel agents could do that better. Um, and then there is the third one. It is infrastructure. I mentioned Spain, that they are building their high-speed track. They actually open a tunnel. Well, there is already a tunnel to Barajas Airport from Madrid city center. That's currently only accessible for regional trains. That will be accessible for high-speed trains, and that is what governments can do, making their airports accessible for high-speed trains. Well, we see Spain is doing that with Barajas. That means that more flights, more feeder flights become redundant. But if you look at Poland, for example, they are building a new airport and a new high-speed network, and they integrate it completely.
Mm.
They have a master plan of having everything integrated, and that connects their cities. Um, so I think it's having a bit more of a master plan connecting airports there. Um, yeah, and then, well, to top it off, maybe I mentioned it earlier already, and that's maybe something that you and I, maybe it's a nice assignment for me. Um, Make it visible what there is possible already. So just have a few maps of Europe as if it were a metro diagram. What international connections do we have already? Um, well, and
That
then
would
an
be a
assignment
great
for you.
resource.
Okay, okay, I'll take it up. Challenge accepted. And then your assignment is spread the word.
I will. No, I think that would be a great resource, super helpful. And like that, this visibility, I think, is the main thing that we could do. So I think, yeah, like showing people what train connections exist, firstly, but also some things that I see as very simple to improve, but I can understand why they're not. But I think they would be something that could be easily implemented. It's like multilingual signage. So especially if you're going cross-border, like in a train station that is very international, like the Gare du Nord, I do not understand why we don't have signage in English, German, Italian. I don't understand. I think that they do it because they want to make a statement like we're in France now, which is fine and like understandable. But at the same time, if you have an international arrivals, like they will be more inclined to use you if there is common verbiage. Um, so I think that's one thing they could do. Accessibility
Yeah, you
definitely needs to be improved in terms of disabilities. Like they need to implement, say, the Sunflower Lanyard program, which is for autism, where you can ask for help if you need it. And I think ramps, for wheelchair users could be extremely, I think they could be easy, but perhaps that's my naivety.
Yeah, it's both points are really interesting. You could think of international signage at least for icons and those little symbols on stations to have that standardized.
Yeah,
Um, although people might oppose to too much European standardization, but I think that could definitely help if you see it as an integrated network, and that is how Europe does see it. In terms of accessibility, I think we can learn from America. There is a few laws there that actually prescribes what it needs to be.
mm,
And there are many things in that law that is easy to overlook if you don't think of it, if you don't struggle with it. For example, if you're colorblind, many people design things that are just unreadable for people that are colorblind. And the same as you say with ramps, is it's of course more challenging in the old city centers of Europe, but it's
yeah.
definitely possible. Um, and it's probably also the comfort that you get that you know, okay, it's a European law. I know if I take a train in Paris, it will be fine because it must be fine.
Yeah, exactly. Like even if we look at trains, which are not ones that we've been speaking about, like I've lived a lot of my life in London, and even between London Underground stations, it is not standardized. Like you have wheelchair accessible stations, and then you have step-free access stations, which are not the same thing. But it's like, how is that confusing?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. It's hard. I imagine it's hard to retrofit it, especially in London. But here
definitely.
it comes again. Also about bringing the message and have it clear visibility on what are the possibilities actually.
Definitely. So let's kind of move on then to sustainable travel in general. Do you think that's purely about carbon footprint, or what does that mean to you?
Well, even if you think about your footprint, it's more about the carbon footprint. Um, I like to think of efficiency, and that's also why I like trains that much because they are a very efficient way of traveling because there is little resistance. You are not carrying fuel, you're not carrying batteries. So just in terms of the energy needed to move people, it's very efficient. So that's one of the reasons I like trains and why I am a very big advocate of magnetic elevation trains. But maybe that's another story that we can speak about another time because there is even less resistance and it's more efficient, etc. But I think if it comes to sustainable travel, and I like to focus on transport because um, I feel more comfortable with transport than with travel in a broader sense. I think you should look broader than what is the footprint of my trip here, but what is actually um, what's what puts a weight on a city if I use something. So if you use even a metro, that metro needs to be built, and there is a footprint there as well. But if you take a bike, it's really lightweight. You don't need much infrastructure for parking. You don't need heavy infrastructure to ride a bike. So in that sense, it's really efficient to build. It does not have a lot of maintenance, and if something is easier, it's also more sustainable in a sense, especially in the long run. Um, yeah, there's two more things that I like to mention there. That's like um, if you look at carbon footprint and you take an electrical car, then your carbon footprint is zero, especially if you charge it with solar energy. But that car weighs like 2,000 kilos or 2,500 kilos. That's really heavy on infrastructure, and that infrastructure suffers a lot from it. So that also has really an influence, well, basically on your carbon footprint and definitely on sustainability. And if it's a big car, it needs a lot of space to park it. And if you drive it, you need more space of that car that cannot go to pedestrians. I think to me that's less sustainable than a bike, and that's not only about the carbon footprint. Um, Yeah, and it's maybe a bit off topic, but you might be familiar with the fare gates that you need to go through if you take a metro. And that is to make sure that everybody has a ticket when they board a metro. But what you now often see if you build a new metro station, that they have to build a mezzanine. So you go down into the ground, then there is a mezzanine just to have a lot of fare gates, and then you go even deeper into the metro station itself. And that's just to put the fare gates there. So just because you have developed the system, how to prove that people have paid, you have to build a whole new, you have to build an extra level within your metro station. It's really expensive, and I think also really unsustainable to do that. So um, I I like to think of sustainability really wider of efficient use of resources.
Mm. That's super interesting, Tim. That's like a really unique answer that I've had to that question because I ask that question every single time. Everybody gives me a different answer, and I just kind of listen and let them say what they have to say. It's like sustainable travel has an official definition, and I think it's so interesting because it just doesn't really, the official definition doesn't really apply to anyone. Like everybody has a different idea of what it means. And that's great. Like especially as you say, because efficient use of resources is also good for people. Like it's
Of
also
course,
being
yeah,
mindful of the cities, like how we impact the cities that we visit or the places that we visit as well.
indeed, indeed. Um, Yeah, you can talk for hours about it. I'm wondering then, what kind of answers have you had, and what kind of other answers came to mind
Ah,
that are stuck with you? If you mention one,
you'll have to listen to the podcast, but we get a lot of cultural travelers on the show who are very interested in like particularly protecting people and preserving heritage. So a lot of the answers that I get are about like the combination of everything. And especially when I interview people who are really interested in wildlife, I often expect them to say that sustainable travel is to do with the environment or it's to do with like protecting wildlife. And they always say people, they always say it's to do with like ingratiating cultures into wildlife preservation so that they can protect it for years to come. That's really interesting.
it is. It is.
Hmm.
Nice.
So, tell us a bit then about Bookachoo because we've kind of spoken a little bit about it throughout the episode, but tell us what it is and if there's a way that listeners can use it as well.
Yeah. So the initial idea was that train-plane combination that I was mentioning before when I was at Frankfurt Airport, and what I did myself in the years after when I traveled. So replacing those feeder flights and being basically a aviation platform where feeder flights were replaced by trains. That was the initial idea, and the initial idea was also to have it B2C. But turns out that customers that still there's two type of customers. Either people don't fly at all anymore, or people fly whatever the cost for the environment.
Mm.
So that was not the best niche to be in. So we became a B2B platform. Also because we think our impact can be higher there, and a company can make a pledge and say we use Bookachoo, and then they know for any trip that is sold through that is acquired through Bookachoo, that it is the most sustainable way of traveling
Mm.
within reasonable amounts, of course. So that's what we do. We sell trips to business travelers, basically. That be, if it's possible, direct train. If that's not possible, direct flight, and if that's not possible, the train-plane combination. Um, and we've been doing that now for some 2.5 years, something like that. But then companies approached us like, hey, but we just want trains, and you come with train plane combinations, but can you also do just trains? And we said, yeah, of course. We just didn't really know that there was a market for that. Because I thought that that was not an issue, but it turns out that it is an issue to just buy train tickets in Europe. So that's what we do. And then some leisure travel companies also found us, and they said we have this city trips that we sell a flight and a hotel, or we uh, only sell a hotel or a theme park ticket, and then people have to get there themselves. But we actually want to offer that with the train as well. But it's really hard. Can you help us? So now we supply them with tickets as well. So we're really B2B platform. So if you are a company that wants to make the travel more sustainable, then you definitely should give me a call. If you're a leisure travel company and you're looking for trains as well, of course. Um, and if you're just interested in it, and you want to book something for yourself and you like to speak about trains, then my mailbox is always open, of course.
Awesome. So it's super adaptable at the moment. It's kind of like anything people want, you're trying to do it, I guess.
As long as the train is first, and the only thing we say, we like to think along with you, but at our terms, if there is a train possible, then we do it by train.
Yeah.
So I said quite a few times no to people that said, I want to fly from here to there, and there was a direct flight, and there was no train. I said, that's cool. And then they said, I found a cheaper flight with a stopover. Can you also book me on that? And I want to book through your platform. I said, we just don't do it. It's 150 euros cheaper for you, but we don't do it.
Awesome. I think you have to stick to your morals, and obviously, like it's a certain particular type of client that you're looking for, so it makes complete
Yeah.
sense to me. I think it's great. So that's awesome, Tim. Can you tell us then what are you working on at the moment and where can people find you?
Um, yeah. With Bookachoo, we're just improving our product, and that mostly means connecting more and more APIs. And there's a whole lot of train operators that we have to connect with, and also finding new clients, of course, because we want to get more people on the trains.
Mhm.
So that's with Bookachoo, and it's really exciting, but it's a bit business as usual. And next to that, I always have a few side projects, and they're always um, public transport related. So I post a lot on LinkedIn about, I don't know, a new proposal about um, a metro network somewhere in the world. Probably there comes up that map that we spoke about of the high-speed cross-border trains in Europe. But I try to give some information and spread the positive news, what is actually out there, and also to let people know what is out there. For example, I gave example about Poland making that airport and that high-speed network. Those are the things that I post on LinkedIn and try to spread the positivity in Trainland a little bit there.
Awesome. So if people love trains, they should check you out, definitely.
If they love trains, if they love metros, if they love metro diagrams,
Mm.
even wayfinding, they should definitely follow me. Yeah.
You're the guy. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Tim. This has been the Sustainable Travel Podcast. You can find us on Instagram at the Sustainable Travel Podcast. If you're listening on Spotify or YouTube, please don't forget to like and subscribe. And thank you so much.